industry expert. He's a Harvard Business School alum, and he's the co-founder and CEO of Rescale, the leader of cloud high-performance computing, one of the best startups in the Silicon Valley, backed by some of the best investors, including Moderator, Jeff Bezos, Sir Richard Branson, Chris Dixon, among others. Please welcome Joris Poort. Well, first off, thanks so much for joining us. And I'd like to start with a brief intro of what is Rescale, what is high-performance computing, and what's the use case, what kind of customers does Rescale serve?
Sure. First of all, thank you for coming on a Sunday morning. I'm a little tired. Hopefully you guys are not too tired. So Rescale, you probably haven't heard about it. It's a large enterprise software company. We provide essentially a platform for engineers and scientists to run very large-scale computations. So similar to what AWS has done for developers, we built a platform to run engineering and scientific codes essentially on a very large network of supercomputers. And what our customers do is basically they take these are automotive companies, aerospace companies, big Fortune 500 companies, and they design their products. So they run very large scale simulations to do things like aerospace design, to design a commercial jet, designing rockets, companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, designing the next generation of aerospace products like Boom Supersonic, and that's the YC company Michael was talking about. And what I think is very exciting is now we're expanding to many other verticals as well. So we're also doing this in automotive. That's one of our biggest segments. And industries like life sciences, financial services, oil and gas. And so in each of those, what we do is we help provide capability for a data analyst or a scientist or an engineer to run essentially as large scale of a math problem that they want to run. It's a little bit technical, but it's the fundamentals of how a Boeing 787 is designed. It's the fundamentals of how a Falcon rocket by SpaceX is built. And it's also the fundamentals of Formula One cars and an average car that you drive every day. And that's what we do at Rescale. I think I answered most of that question. I think what's very exciting about it is right now, high-performance computing or supercomputing is our industry segment, and it's undergoing a big change because Moore's law is essentially slowing down. So for a single CPU or processor per core, there's not a lot more acceleration you're getting because basically you can't make a chip much smaller than what they make in the size today. So the next speed up or the next big compute infrastructure scale up is going to come from new chipsets. So that's why if you look at NVIDIA as a company, take a look at their stock chart, it just goes straight up. If you look at Google, where they're spending a lot of their resources that they're not publicly talking that much about, it's on their TensorFlow TPU. So it's a special processor that all it does is run TensorFlow a lot faster. And that's kind of where all the next generation of very large physics and math problems are going. They're all going to specialized processors. And as Rescale, we're a company in that space, what we call big compute. And we help anybody get access to those resources, large and small. But again, most of our customers are kind of large-scale enterprise companies, so not really the Silicon Valley companies, but a lot of traditional, manufacturing companies.
Wow, that sounds like a huge but very specific problem. I'd love to know how you get started. Because it's not like a social network for you.
Yeah, so we're still one of those companies in the middle of that grind that Michael was talking about, right? So we're already 6 years old. We did YC in the winter 2012. And we started before YC actually. My background was as a mechanical engineer, aerospace engineer. I also studied applied math and some computer science. And so basically I was working at Boeing doing this type of development for the 787 Dreamliner wing. So the wing design, if you've seen it, it's a carbon fiber wing as opposed to a metal wing. And that's kind of a big jump in engineering capability. And so we wrote a lot of software for that. Now that experience, that's one of the hard things about enterprise software companies is big companies do things very differently than small companies. And so I had the experience working at a big company to see how they use supercomputing centers, high performance computing capability. And out of that experience, this is now more than a decade ago, so more than 10 years ago, but that led me to thinking, hey, there must be a better way. And then I saw a lot of analogies in other industries. So what AWS did for developers, so cloud computing was just starting. And I thought, hey, there's a big shift happening to go to these specialized processors. I better start this company like immediately because I'm late. But that was 6 years ago, and I think now it's actually that inflection point has hit now. But it was definitely early. So the early days were just developing the software myself. So I do have mostly technical background and some business background, but the first days is just all about building that first product. And then, pursuing that with, I think, a lot of passion behind it, got other people around me excited about it. And then I was able to build like the rest of the founding team and get our initial investors, right? But the initial, at the time when we started this company, it was social, local, and mobile were the big trends. So the unfortunate thing about Rescale is it's not even a single one of those, and I couldn't even make up a story why it wasn't any of those. And so, I think you should really follow, what you're really passionate about as opposed to looking at trends of, what's hot now, like machine learning or IoT or autonomous driving. If it's hot now, it's already kind of too late to start a company in that space, in my opinion. It'll be extremely competitive. There'll be many other companies. And so if you just follow like what you're personally really passionate about, for example, I think like in life sciences, things like computational chemistry, computational biology, very exciting space, hasn't really been pursued that much. In the next like 5 or 10 years, that would be the hottest investing space. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to happen, but you should follow that passion. So I think that for us paid off because we kind of have been pursuing the same idea since 6 years ago, and now we're really that inflection point hit about a year and a half ago, and now the company has scaled out much faster. But we've just never gave up, and you just keep going, and that's where that passion is really important. Because if you're just doing it to make money or because you want to start a company, you'll probably change your idea very quickly or do a different company. And so I think out of that experience, my advice would be just follow your passion and build something. So the great thing also about YC is if you're thinking about doing YC, it's like, if you just build your company, that's exactly what YC wants you to do. So you don't have to like game it or do something special for the application. All the questions they ask are all about building your company. And so that's the best place to start, is just start finding that founding team and building your first product.
I think you mentioned one of the reasons you started is because you feel like you're late. But what's the specific point where you just decide, I need to take the leap and leave my previous job and I need to do this full time and pursue being a founder as a career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think basically there's never a perfect time to start, right? So for me, I actually didn't really set out wanted to start a company after college. I was just really excited about solving the biggest kind of technical problems. And so that's why I went to go work for Boeing. And I pursued that. It was very, fulfilling, but after a while I also started seeing, hey, there's a better way, and I couldn't really convince the big company to start, shifting over to solve that way. And that was, at that point, I'd already been in this kind of research or commercial space for more than 10 years. And then basically out of frustration, I went and did an MBA because I realized I could study more technical stuff, but it's not going to help me solve these bigger problems. And then really with that in hand, I felt like I had a really good insurance policy. So the worst thing that would happen is, just take a job somewhere else. And nobody else was still solving that problem. And I thought it was so obvious and everybody should be solving it. And like I said, I thought it was even late to start to solve it. But I basically, for about 15 years, hadn't seen anybody do a better way, and so, then decided maybe I'm the one who's supposed to build a better way. But I think, so, I think the lesson learned from that is if you just think it's a good idea, you can keep it in the back of your head, but if it keeps bothering you and you've been trying to do it for 5 or 6 years, and it still isn't getting solved better, or there's still a big opportunity there, you should pursue that, because usually it means nobody else is actually doing that or thinking that.
Awesome. Actually, within the audience, how many of you are MBAs or have an MBA? Wow, quite a lot. Actually, I want to ask you guys, what do you think within an MBA degree do you enjoy the most, or is most helpful for your pursuit of a career as a founder?
Yeah, so I think it does depend also where you do your MBA, but I think because ultimately it comes down to the people and the network. So I think while Michael's right that ultimately success of companies really comes down to many things other than your connections or your ability to access a lot of capital, because actually the harder it is to be able to start a company, the best companies come to the top actually. So some of the best companies today, like Google, were started during a time that was the worst possible time kind of macro environment to start a company. So doing an MBA gives you access to a lot of people in your network who are excited about doing entrepreneurship, hopefully. If you do it at a place around here, like Berkeley or Stanford, I think it provides a unique access to amazing engineering schools. I myself am pretty biased. I think technology and engineering is pretty critical to building really great companies. You can have very successful kind of business model innovations, but those are usually much lower barriers to entry and actually much harder businesses to compete with. So I think having access to that, those engineering schools and the students in those schools, with that network is probably the most valuable thing you get. And at the school I went to, at HBS, they basically do a lot of case studies. And so I think one of the most valuable things I saw was going through all these different companies and seeing how these different companies work. And it builds up a certain level of confidence of, and you get to meet a lot of other, successful CEOs and things. And you start realizing, hey, pretty much anybody can be CEO of a company. So it gives you some confidence that, they're not all super geniuses. But I think, that gives you that confidence to actually pursue it. But the flip side of that is that if it makes it actually easier, for example, to raise money or to get access to other people who might be able to give you money to start a company, it doesn't actually really solve the fundamental problem of building a really successful company. And so I think actually more companies maybe get started, but there's less of a success ratio there. And so having some friction early in the process isn't really necessarily a bad thing.
I'm glad you mentioned investment, because I'm sure a lot of the audience are very curious of how you get so much awesome investors behind you, including CEO of Amazon, including Mr. Richard Branson. I'd love to hear the story of how you get access to them, and also what's the company like when they make investments.
Sure. So I think the first investor in Rescale was actually Paul Green, personal investment, and I have to give him a lot of props, because the reason he invested was actually because he felt bad for us. So we were out there raising money, and this is back when Series A were a little bit more normally go down the same road and talk to investors. And we just kept getting shot down, because again, it was a social locomotive, we didn't fit any of the trends. And we're trying to do this deep technology for aerospace companies. Aerospace, generally a terrible market to sell into. And really deep tech is also very hard to understand. So most investors are usually pretty lazy, so they don't actually want to try to understand your technology. So if you come with something that's difficult to understand, they actually really like you to actually try to even understand what you're trying to do. And so Paul Graham kind of wrote that first check, so I'm forever thankful for him. But he did that because he loves aerospace, and just kind of, again, got lucky, right? Got lucky. This is already a year and a half into the company, right? So you have to kind of have that perseverance and that grit, and I think he saw that in the founding team, and he wrote that check. Jeff Bezos, we got lucky again, where we were trying to solve a problem for aerospace companies, and it turned out, this is both a combination of a very large infrastructure, like compute infrastructure problem, and he has obviously at that time Amazon Web Services that was just starting to grow really fast, and he has a space company, Blue Origin, and he had always been trying to get Blue Origin to use Amazon Web Services, and I think it was he saw kind of, hey, this is a company that really should exist, and just more from a technology perspective. And, so that's where he wrote a check. He was, I think, the second investor. And what's the company like? I mean, it's awesome, right? So, I think the thing is that it's just one day you get that check, you're really happy, and then it's like back to work, basically, right? So the real magic doesn't actually happen in the fundraising rounds or when you read about a company in TechCrunch. It's about years and years of investment that happens usually before that, and it's more a little bit of validation, and then off to actually build to the next milestones you're pursuing. Another early investor was actually Peter Thiel, and he has this thesis in the book 0 to 1 around man-machine symbiosis, and that's kind of combining the power of algorithms and computers with the smartest people. And that combination together is extremely powerful for anything from things like chess and Go to at PayPal detecting fraud, to Palantir detecting patterns in networks. And Rescale is kind of an analogy of that for engineers and scientists, right? So, I think again it's not like we started the company to fit that thesis. It just happened to be that he had seen that in a lot of successful companies, and he pattern matched that thesis, right? And that's where, he invested based on that. But in the end, it was just years and years of hard work. And ultimately, I think if you believe in that and you build a successful company, some investors will validate that, right? But it's not really everybody thinks that it's like, okay, then you go back, hey, we made it as a company, this is awesome. But really the magic happens when you have, big deals you close with great customers and really help. I think for me, it was more about when I walk around at SpaceX and I see people using our software to design the next generation of rockets, or see a real technological breakthrough that a company like Boom Supersonic is able to make because our technology exists, right? So it's really what the customers do that I think is the most amazing part, and getting investment from great, smart people is a piece of that equation, but it's not the whole thing.
Awesome. So full disclosure, we're actually also an investor in Rescale, and actually the reason why we invest is because I show Rescale's product to one of my engineering friend who works in a research institute, and he said, this is an awesome product. I can't persuade the institute to use it, but I actually want to pay out of my own pocket to use it, and that's why we do. It's really going to change a lot of people's perspective of how the workflow should change. Actually, I played with Rescale's product personally, and I realized you guys actually support TensorFlow on the browser as well, and without any requirements to set up. What's your vision for the entire artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Sure. So for machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think it all comes down to the applications and the data. So for us, the verticals we again work in is like aerospace, automotive, life sciences. There's a lot of very interesting data sets that are generated on our platform already without machine learning applied to it, just very large scale simulations based on the physics and the computations in these industries. So what we see is combining that with applying machine learning to it is really kind of supercharging the ability to go through, in the case of, say, designing an aircraft, many design cycles or different design points very quickly. In the case of life sciences, is doing computational chemistry and making those calculations more efficiently to be able to solve compute problems that historically haven't really been possible before. And so machine learning in and of itself is interesting, but there's the real pursuit, like the actual real artificial intelligence, is still going to take many decades to get even close to that. I think there's very exciting milestones and progress that we've made so far, but we're still kind of somewhat waiting from that point of that a computer is essentially smarter than a human, right? Or can do the intelligence that a human brain can deliver. But what we are already very much into, and we have been into for the past several years, is that you can leverage machine learning as a tool to supercharge a lot of things you're already doing. And that's where the real power comes from. And so I think what I'm very excited about is ultimately, if you have the data sets within a company, and so these are usually large companies who already are either running very complex products or product design or virtual data sets that they've collected over time, that they're able to apply machine learning to that and drive the next generation of innovation from that. I do think that without machine learning, if you're a company that, for example, doesn't do that, it's going to be really hard to stay up and be competitive with companies that do it. So it's not actually really an option. So I think for most certainly industrial companies, they have to start applying machine learning as a way to just generate the next innovations faster. And as Rescale, what we try to do is make it really easy to use. So by making it really easy to use, we don't require the aerodynamicists at Boeing or the computational chemists at Pfizer to have to be experts at the computer science and machine learning pieces. We try to make it really easy for them to connect their expertise with that machine learning and then derive those insights that they're looking for in their specific disciplines.
Awesome. So Rescale is one of the fastest growth startup that reaches $10 million US dollar in terms of run rate. What's next up?
Yeah, so I think last year and a half has been really exciting for us. We're really expanding geographically. So we opened offices in Munich and Tokyo, and now we have 5 or 6 other locations. So for us, China is a new market. We're aggressively kind of entering and looking at how do we expand there. We're doing similar in Korea and Europe. So I think geographic expansion is the things we're already doing. And then we're always investing also in new sectors like financial services, oil and gas, semiconductor, electronic design automation. So we're expanding the product line to address other verticals as well. And as a quick little plug, if you're interested in pursuing that, we're definitely hiring. And so we're expanding the team pretty aggressively right now within San Francisco and in other regions as well. So if you're interested, we have lots of openings, and you can just email me directly with that.
Awesome. What kind of candidates would you be looking at? What kind of characters or positions?
Basically, anybody with computer science or engineer technical backgrounds is always really great. We're also hiring marketing, product management, and business backgrounds as well, especially for expansion in other geographies. But you can just go to rescale.com/careers. There's a lot of posts there, and you can email me directly, just joris@rescale.com. Most founders don't really hide their email addresses, so that's a tip. It's the same with Michael. Anybody, just first name at company.com. Just let us know if you're interested. We'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. I'll leave the rest of the time to Q&A. Yes.
What computations were you unable to solve? And what computations were you able to solve successfully that pushed your technology limits?
Sure. So I think every industry has many large computational problems that are still very compute constrained. And so at Boeing, when we were working there, we could only run so many aerodynamics iterations at a time. It took about a week to run one big physics aerodynamic design formulation, and so if we want to run thousands of those, it becomes impossible. And actually, if you think about something like machine learning, you need to run many iterations to be able to collect that data set, to be able to train on that data set. And we were doing this is a long time ago, 10 years ago, but the equivalent of machine learning applied aerodynamics. And in order to do that, it's always compute constrained. And so eventually we were able to solve that by both investing a lot more in hardware, and obviously cloud and a platform like Rescale helps you be able to solve those problems. But today there's still problems, for example, in computational chemistry. They're just so big that the compute time takes longer than it takes to do the physical lab test. But that, compute again is still, we're going along Moore's Law, but now Moore's Law is slowing down and going to specialized chip architecture. So you're still seeing a compounding magnitude improvement in computational speed every few years. And that provides the opportunity to solve some of these life sciences problems, which will take, today a drug discovery process costs about $2 billion. If you do it computationally, probably do it for like $20 to $40 million, right? And so then all of a sudden you can do also drugs that are custom, computed for your own DNA sequence, right? So there are many different, opportunities. It's essentially infinite, right? Because you can keep formulating kind of bigger problems to solve. But most of those are not even attempted today because the compute capabilities aren't there yet. So that's what we're excited about at Rescale, is to try to help bring that there. And our partners and our infrastructure network kind of helps those customers achieve that.
Somebody pass the mic.
All right, thank you. So I just have a question about before you get the investment from PG. You're about like 2 years, you're just kind of working on the product by yourself.
Yeah.
And you talk about how did you actually get through that experience, and what kind of validation you were looking, because probably back then it's more valuable that you have to go through. So can you just share with us that kind of experience?
Sorry, yeah, so it was more about what's the validation in that early days?
Early stage, what we're able to get you through that period.
Yeah, sure. So I think, the early days are all about, passion and grit. There's actually a pretty good book called Grit, GRIT, that's, I think, pretty helpful read on that. So basically success is kind of a combination of, it's actually not, you don't have to be a genius, right? But it's about pursuing and persistence and perseverance and being smart enough that you're not pursuing something that's not really worth, I think, or not really worth it for a customer set. So one thing YC teaches you is, build something people want. So you have to be talking to customers and getting feedback on that. In the case of an enterprise company, in our case, it's, some of that can come from your own experience, right? We were basically building the software I wish, we had going. So you can use yourself as a proxy for them. The hard thing about enterprise software is it's harder to those iterations basically take longer, right? So you need to build something to get feedback on how to, can you design an aircraft better? It's a much longer iteration than the A/B testing a website, right? And so I think that's where enterprise companies take a little bit longer in the early days. But what kept me going is I just really cared about solving that problem, and I just didn't really care about necessarily. Sure, nobody was investing in the company at that time. It was turned down by over 80 investors before the first investor invested, right? And that can be a little bit demoralizing. But in some ways, it can also feed your passion to say, look, I know I'm right. So as long as my customers believe that, and in our case, our first customers were companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, based off value of what we were building, that's all that really matters, right? And ultimately, the best companies, I do believe in Peter Thiel's kind of 0 to 1, the best companies only kind of happen once, right? So the hard thing about that as an investor is you can't actually look too much externally. You got to look internally to be, are you solving a really important problem? And are your customers excited about you solving that problem? I think if you get those two things right, that should be able to keep you going. And in our case, it was a year and a half. For other people, it can be only 3 or 6 months before they get their first investor. But I also know other cases where it takes them 10 years or something like that. But as long as your customers find it valuable, you can start actually getting them to pay for your product, and you can fund your company that way. I think investors are not necessary for you to pursue the company. It's just a nice accelerant that if you can take advantage of, you should do that.
Go ahead.
Something that AWS cannot do.
question. Basically, for us, why is it better than building your own data center? So 95% of high performance computing is all on premise. So that's what most people do today, is they basically build their own data center. The reason that's not very smart is because the speed of the chips updating. So most people keep their data center for 4 to 5 years. And the speed at which the chips are updating, there's like NVIDIA is releasing a new chip every year or so that's about 5 times faster. So after that chip gets released, actually it makes no sense to be running old GPUs. And so you should really be refreshing your data center every year or 2 years, right? And that gets very, very expensive. But big companies are not necessarily that fast at adopting new technologies, right? So that's where it takes some time. So most of these companies actually already starting to use Rescale or other external services to kind of stop buying new data centers. But that shift happens kind of over time. Why is AWS not investing in this? It's mostly about this fragmentation of chip architectures. So if you look at it, like on Rescale, we have more than 80 different server architectures you can choose from. And we have our own network of supercomputing centers and infrastructure partners. And for AWS to build every single one of those is also extremely expensive, right? And so I think over time, they will invest in it more. Microsoft is investing in it more, Google is as well. And we want them to. But ultimately, commodity computing is kind of where the focus is right now. So for them, you know, the business kind of ROI of building a new data center for AWS is much better in commodity computing than in specialized computing. And so I think over time that will shift, and that will be a good thing for us. So we partner very closely with Amazon, with Microsoft, with Google. You know, Jeff Bezos is an investor, Microsoft's an investor. So like we're helping try to accelerate that process actually. But these, you know, supercomputing centers are like 10 to 100 times more expensive than a traditional commodity data center. And so it's even for very large companies, it's extremely expensive to make those investments. And the market is still 95% on premise. That's exactly where that shift to cloud is what Rescale is, you know, that's the opportunity our investors are looking to take advantage of.
I think that's our time. Thanks so much for